The Express Community Newspaper and LockHaven.com are pleased to meet with Senator Jake Corman, pro tempore of the Senate, who represents the 34th Senatorial District, encompassing all of Center, Mifflin, and Juniata counties and part of Huntington County. And the legislator is here to talk with us and to the constituents before returning to Harrisburg. So we're pleased to have you here.
Thank you.
We have a few questions for you, and then, like I said, we'll let you talk about what you like at the end. So let's start with the controversial decision to conduct a forensic audit of Pennsylvania's November 2020 general election. Senator, you want to conduct a forensic audit of that election. You said it is not designed as a recount,
right,
but rather, and I quote you, to get to the bottom of everything that went on. So two questions. What went on that merits the audit, and why remove Senator Mastriano and appoint Senator Dush to convene the hearings?
Let me start out by saying thank you for having me come here today. Your paper obviously covers, even though I don't live in Clinton County, your paper covers a good bit of the 34th Senatorial District, and so I wanted to come and spend some time with you. Since November of last year, there's probably not been an issue that my office has been contacted the most about, other than election integrity, and how the election came down, how there was a lot of unusual things that went on, and the people who I represent asking, if not demanding, answers, and us provided our role. The legislature's role is oversight. And obviously the elections are run by county and state government together, as well as federal, you can say. And so the Department of State, doesn't implement the election, but they certainly provide guidance and then pull it all together. So with that concern out there, and I'll get into the details of that in a second, I just think it's important for us to do our job. And to do our job is to provide oversight to state activities. And, democracy is so important, obviously, and I think we would all could agree on that, whether you're Republican, Democrat, whether you come from rural, urban, suburban Pennsylvania. Elections happen, they come and they go. Republicans win, Democrats win, we all survive, right? I'm a Republican, I didn't vote for Barack Obama either time, I didn't vote for Tom Wolf either time. We're surviving. A lot of Democrats probably didn't vote for Donald Trump the first term, probably didn't vote for George W. Bush or Tom Corbett. We all make the best of it, we move on. But the key component to an election is the belief in the election and the belief in the results of the election. And again, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you ought to have faith in the election, because if you don't have faith in the election, then you don't believe your vote matters. And if you don't believe your vote matters, then you have a problem, because then people will bring that frustration out in many different ways. I think a lot of the protests that we saw last year, after the George Floyd, emanate from a frustration that their voices were not being heard, right? That they were not being recognized, and so therefore they took to the streets. And then unfortunately, some people took that legitimate protest and made it worse and had violence. So, if people don't believe that they have a role in civil society or democratic government, then they're going to act out. And so our job as policymakers, as legislators, is to, if that belief is out there, and it is, whether people agree with it or not, it is out there and it is significant, then our job is to get to the bottom of that. Our job is to conduct an investigation, oversight of how the election was performed. As policymakers, all we can do is take that information and then try to make things better moving forward. This isn't about overturning an election. We have no authority to do that. What we want to do, we started out, my first act as pro tem was to create an election integrity committee, bipartisan. And we did that, and we had a lot of hearings, and it emanated in us passing a bill. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed it, which just adds to that frustration. So now you have people who didn't necessarily have a belief in the last election result, and now you have people who say, wow, they passed a nice bill, they included a lot of good things that would help, and that's vetoed. So now we're back to square one. And so what I hope to accomplish, and I'll get into the details of your second question part, is that at the end of the day, one or two things are going to happen. Either we're going to uncover some information that will help us put into statute reforms so that people will believe in the election moving forward, or we won't uncover anything, and then maybe that helps dispel a lot of the of the issues that people were concerned about, and again brings faith back into the system. So at the end of the day, I'm just trying to accomplish, faith in the system. I don't have a predetermined. This is an investigation where I have a predetermined result. What's going to be important about this investigation is the credibility of it, the credibility of how it was conducted, who conducted it, and then whenever the results bring out, or we get from this investigation, that not only Republican eyes will agree with it, but Democrat eyes, independent eyes, all eyes will agree with what recommendations come out of it. So I just think in this rather volatile time, and the day of the internet, where conspiracies are high and rumors are high, and it's important for us to get to the factual part of it, things, and so that's why I think it's important to to act Election Integrity Committee to take this next step to again try to bring faith back into the system for the large segment of the population who doesn't believe in the faith. The reason that I made the change, and I don't want to get too deep into sort of personnel matters, the credibility of this investigation is extremely important. You can't have it. If you start off by bringing doubt into it, by hiring individuals that may be connected to one side or the other, taking dark money to sort of fund things like that nature, you almost lose before you start. And after months of working the former chair, I just couldn't get to a place where we were comfortable in the direction it was going for a credibility point of view. And so Chris Dush, who obviously represents this area, a former naval officer, has got an investigation background. I have faith that Chris can do a good job. We left Senator Mastriano on the committee so he can be part of it, because he certainly has put a lot of work into it. But again, at the end of the day, I hope, if I've established anything in my 22-year career, is credibility. And I'm one about getting results. I always joke that I'm a chairman of the Can-Do Caucus, Get Things Done Caucus, Get Things Done. And I want to get this done, and I want to get it done right, and the results will be what they are, and I have faith that Senator Dush can accomplish this.
So that leads to another question. Who will conduct the audits? Will it be
Well, we're working on that now. We're working with some vendors. Again, that'll be important as we move forward. I think what we want to start out with, and I don't want to get into Senator Dush's territory too much because he's a chair of this committee now, but I think we want to bring citizens in to get started. Bring citizens in to come in and testify under oath of a lot of their concerns with the last election or fraud that they may have seen personally. You sort of get a lot of stories out there. We had a hearing in Gettysburg back in November after the election. A lot of people came in and talked. Unfortunately, we didn't get, for whatever reason, no one did it under oath, and we didn't get a lot of signed affidavits, right? So we want to give people, citizens of Pennsylvania who are out there talking about this, let's bring them in. Let's bring them in under oath to talk about what transpired, what they saw, what happened to them maybe, and give them, to sort of start out that way to at least bring credence that there is a problem. And then as we move forward, we'll need to get information. But again, I don't want to get too far into Chris's territory. But clearly, we will have to hire individuals to assist us. We're not forensic auditors by any stretch of imagination. One of the issues we're going to have to deal with before is, for whatever reason, the Secretary of State has taken the current acting Secretary of State has taken a very aggressive approach to the voting machines. Fulton County has now, I believe, filed a complaint against the Department of State because they decertified their machines. They didn't investigate them, they didn't look at it and didn't say there was a problem, they just did it. And so I think that we're going to assist Fulton County in that endeavor. The threat of decertifying all those machines gave everyone pause, right? Because we don't want to waste a lot of taxpayer dollars by bringing a lot of machines in, and then the state decertify them all, they have to buy all new machines. We want to understand from the machine manufacturers, well, why would someone looking at this cause a problem that they can't be used in the future? So let's be thoughtful, let's be smart, let's not just sort of rush in and grab things and then deal with the consequences later. Let's get the Secretary of State, let's support Fulton County and their case, and get the machine manufacturers in there, find out why they think they need to be certified immediately so that we don't do necessarily the things, hopefully, that they're concerned about. So again, it's like, and I'm no expert, but when you do an investigation, it's a methodical process, and and so it's important to do things right and slowly, and not necessarily slowly, but correctly, so that we can move forward. So, because I don't want to indicate that we're going to go slow. We're not. We're going to move quickly, but we want to be smart about it and not just sort of do an approach where we're just doing things to do things. So got to be a reason behind everything. Right. But even before we get into the whole machine issue, I think some simple things you can do is look at the voter rolls, look at the paper ballot results, and do they match up as far as who voted with the voter rolls, things like that. And then there's a whole plethora of things that the Secretary of State did, the former Secretary of State, who resigned, that were completely inappropriate, in my opinion, that we can go through, and whether they quantify into, how many votes, I don't know. But my big grief with the former secretary is, again, we had the most controversial, emotional presidential race in our life, right? And so the last thing what we want is what I said earlier. We want a winner and a loser, and we all move on. The last thing we want is a lot of doubt. And I think the actions of the former secretary, by all the things that she did as far as engaging in a campaign to get people to vote by mail, which, why does the Department of State care how people vote? We allow them to vote by mail, but why are we running ads? Why are we flying planes over certain communities? Did we fly planes as many over Republican communities as Democrat communities? Did we buy ads with not just celebrities and sports athletes, but farmers and sportsmen, and to encourage people? What was the basis of engaging that? What is the basis of the Secretary of State getting rid of signature verification? What is the basis of the Secretary of State out of the blue creating drop boxes without any security? I'm not necessarily opposed to drop boxes, but what you're not allowed to do is go into an apartment building here, right, and get 100 different ballots and put it into the box. Now, I don't know that happened, but I don't know that didn't happen because I don't have any evidence, because we didn't put any security into these drop boxes. So, these and many more actions that the secretary took have brought doubt into the process, and I think we need to go through that so that we can prevent that from happening again.
So the election reforms vetoed by the governor, and now the audit's tied to election reforms. Where do we stand with the proposal to reform the election with voter ID? I know the governor has said he does support voter ID. Well,
I'm not sure he's been real clear on exactly what he supports. But, I think it's too important of an issue not to re-engage. I think some of the Republicans are like, well, the governor vetoed it, so let's just, we'll just use it sort of as a gubernatorial campaign. But it's too important, so I think we need to re-engage. I don't think we give up on voter ID by any stretch of imagination. I think there's many ways that we can get to voter ID that doesn't add as a burden to vote. I think the state of Colorado, quote, blue state, right? I think they have like 14 different types of ID that you could use to qualify for a voter ID. We don't want people who are lower income have to buy something, right? We can provide it. But our philosophy has been, and maybe this is a cliche, but what we want to achieve is make it easier to vote, harder to cheat. I think whether you're Republican, whether you're Democrat, whether you're city, urban, rural, suburban area, everyone should be for that, right? And that's all we're trying to accomplish. We want to make it access as easy as possible for people to vote. But I don't think having some sort of identification is a burden to vote. We use the identification for absolutely everything else we do in our society. So I think it's something that we can get over. I think even former President Obama has mentioned he could be for voter ID. Hopefully the governor, after he vetoed it, I'm not sure what he supports yet, but we will re-engage with the governor and hopefully get a bill that he can sign that we believe in.
Okay, we're going to pivot a little bit to the current to the virus. And have you been vaccinated, and do you encourage others to get vaccinated?
I have been vaccinated. My family's has been vaccinated. What I try to do is my job again is not to encourage or discourage. My job is to get information out to people so they feel comfortable, and then they make their own internal decision on how to move forward. Now that the FDA has approved it, I think that will go a long way to making some people feel more comfortable. But prior to that, let's go back and give former President Trump, a lot of credit. I mean, he got this from day one to the marketplace in record time, and that's great, and it was needed, and I'm glad that he did it. It was a seminal achievement of his career to get this vaccination out to people so that we could try to get back to some normalcy. Unfortunately, when you do that, you have to, they didn't cut any corners and things of that nature, but you do it in rapid speed. And it wasn't, the FDA didn't approve it as of yet. And so it didn't go through the other vaccinations that, obviously a longer process, which got FDA approval. So I could certainly understand why some may be like, maybe I want to wait until I see approval, or I see some sort of, particularly if you're a younger woman maybe in your childbearing years. I just can understand. Or a young person that even if I get the virus, the odds of me being very sick aren't very high. And so maybe I want to wait. So it's not my job to encourage or discourage. My job is to get out there and get information for people so they can make their own decisions in an intelligent way. So I hope people get vaccinated, because I think now the FDA approval, you should feel more comfortable. It gets us back to normalcy faster. It's amazing how sort of a public health crisis became a political battlefield, right? I've never seen anything like it, but it's unfortunately sort of the society that we're in today. It'd be the biggest issue over the last year prior to the election, obviously, was executive power versus legislative power, which emanated in a constitutional amendment where the people of Pennsylvania voted to give the legislature more authority, the issue was, I tried to be not too critical, although I certainly opposed some of the things that the governor did. But we were all going through trial and error, right? I mean, it was, there's no sort of manual on the shelf to grab and say, hey, I see pandemic, do this, right? That didn't exist. There was no sort of wise old person in the room to say, do this. I mean, we were all sort of trial and error. And so everyone's going to make mistakes, including the governor, and he did. And there's the things that I was critical of, but what I was most critical of is that he was doing it unilaterally. And although he would do some informational meetings occasionally with legislative leaders, he certainly wasn't looking for input on his significant policy decisions. And again, in a free society, a democratic society in which we live, it's important for the people to be involved. And so, what that emanated in was, again, my phone's ringing off the hook. My staff can tell you, I'm surprised that all my staff didn't quit. But from the beginning of the pandemic through the election, we've received more calls in the last year than we did the decade previous combined. Because people couldn't get to the governor, right? And so they had to get to their legislative leaders. Why is this unemployment such a disaster? Well, what does this order mean? What does this order mean? And they couldn't get answers from the governor, so they're calling us, and we were trying to get answers, and it was a very, very frustrating time and heartbreaking time. I mean, the people who were calling our offices, I can't make my car payment, I can't make my rent payment because you told me to stay home and not work, but yet I'm not getting my unemployment comp. It was one of the most frustrating, depressing times, I think, for everybody. And so, that sort of, it gets back to, we're not, in our representative democratic society, there's checks and balances to everything. And it wasn't just Governor Wolf. It was Republican governors around the nation as well. And I get why they thought they needed to do this, but I think we've seen it doesn't work well. And we need to have a collaborative decision, checks and balances, so no one has too much power. No one envisioned when they created governor's emergency powers that it would last over a year. I mean, emergency powers are like, okay, there's a flood, there's an earthquake, something like that. You need a governor, an executive person to come in, secure the area, make sure that everybody's safe, right? And we still have that authority. We didn't take that away from them. But after a certain time, you got to go back to a democratic process. And you can't govern for over a year and make every decision for every individual. You just can't. It's just not healthy. And again, so people act out. My vote doesn't matter. I don't have a say. I can't get any help. And you have a civil unrest. And so eventually, our job is to educate as government. Our job is to get information out to people so that they can make their best decisions. But at some point in a free society, you got to allow people to make decisions.
And that's sort of the approach I think you would take when we talk about masking for students. Mm-hmm. The same thing, where it's going to be up to the districts is kind of what you're saying. Let them decide.
Well, look, every district's different. And I think when you allow people to go solve a problem, we're a can-do society, right? We're not a stay-home society. We're okay, here's a problem, give me the best information, and then let's go solve the problem. And so school districts, obviously a lot of people in small spaces. And so they know what the CDC guidelines are. They know what the health recommendations are as far as distancing and so forth. So allow those schools to work through in a public process with their constituents a way to be able to provide a safe environment. Not tell them they can't do it, they got to stay home, but here's all the health requirements, here's all the health recommendations, here are the CDC guidelines. Go design a program or plan for your school that you can provide the best education for kids as absolutely possible. And I have faith in school districts to be able to do that. Some may not be able to do it and say we need to go back to remote. That's their call. I wouldn't support that necessarily as a father of kids in school, but that's ultimately their decision. Maybe it's remote for a little bit of time. I don't know. Masking, same sort of thing. So let them go through it and make those decisions. And I think at the local level they can do that.
Related somewhat to the pandemic are we're talking to a lot of businesses, of course. We have a lot of wonderful advertisers and clients and people we report on. They're having difficulty finding workers. And some are experiencing also significant delays in getting products to sell.
Sure.
Certain segments of retail products. What can the state legislature do to try to alleviate
well, there's a couple of things. And one of it isn't just, unfortunately a lot of this comes down from the federal government. At some point they just take their foot off the gas. I get their desire, and it's bipartisan down there, to jump in and help people during a difficult time. But at some point you have to get to where you can't give an incentive, more incentive not to work than there is an incentive to work. We're a society based on work. You do a hard day's work, you get a hard day's pay, you could go support your family, support your community. But if government continues to roll out money to you for doing nothing and you're making the economic decision, well, I don't need to work because I got this money here, that's bad for society. Certainly understood it during the height of the pandemic, but at some point you got to take your foot off the gas. Look, I didn't lose a paycheck. My wife's a school teacher, she didn't lose a paycheck, but yet the government's sending me money. Why are they sending me money? I didn't lose a paycheck. I've still got the same bills, I got the same issues. I can now some of that you want because you want to stir the economy, right? And I get that to a point, but at some point you got to take your foot off the gas. So the federal government has to take their foot off the gas and allow us to return to some sort of normalcy. Obviously, it is an employees market out there. You can't go by any, particularly in the service industry, you can't go by any window. People can't get work. That is now, or people looking for workers, offering bonuses, things of that nature. We don't need to have a minimum wage discussion. My goodness, we're far past anything that minimum wage would do. Which is good for work. By the way, it's not a bad thing for workers for a change to be in this spot. So, but for a while, but you got to get back to some sort of normalcy. And so that's the first component. The government has to take their foot off the gas. The second component is I hope we learned that we went through, since NAFTA and before, a decade-long, it's international or corporations making decisions where cheap labor overseas was a good business model, right? And so how many jobs do we see here in rural Pennsylvania we had manufacturing town, Lock Haven being one of them, right? That we lost businesses overseas for cheap labor. I always remember the furniture, Pennsylvania furniture down in Selinsgrove, that we used Pennsylvania hardwood, and they made the decision to still use Pennsylvania hardwoods, but ship them overseas, build them, then ship them back. How does that make financial sense? And if it does make financial sense, we got a problem, right? So, with all this sort of, I'm not big about pressuring corporations and so forth, and you've seen it recently, a lot of social things, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be doing this, you ought to be, well, what we should be pressuring in this industry is who take our jobs overseas for cheap labor. We've seen now in an emergency that supply line problems really create issues for our society. And that'll be the next level as the federal government's trying to finalize an infrastructure plan, right? Which could send a lot of infrastructure dollars here for us to hire people to do work. Do we have the skilled labor to do that? Or they can make the decision not to work, right? And that's the next level. And so, I'm hoping that people now look at this, and corporations have made these decisions to take our jobs out of Pennsylvania. If we want to be better as a world, take on environmental issues, reshoring jobs to the United States improves our environment, because we have by far a better environmental standard than any Far East country does. And so the more of those manufacturing jobs that come back to Pennsylvania, come back to the United States, they will be done in a much cleaner fashion. So I'm hoping through this that people will understand that all this offshoring of our jobs may have made some economic sense, but now, and it's particularly in a time of emergency, it doesn't. And we all fought for energy independence, right? Because when you don't have energy independence, then you are reliant on foreign countries that if for whatever reason they have unrest or whatever, then all of a sudden our power or energy goes way high. And so by able to produce that domestically, you have better control of that. That's why I've always been a big supporter, of the agriculture industry and making sure that they can be successful, because if we offshore all those jobs in our food supply, then we really make ourselves vulnerable. Well, now this is the next area of discussion. If you have so many things in the supply chain that are outside the country, and I'm not saying you don't have trade, of course you have trade, but if you have to rely on so many things, we've seen that you can't get things right now, and this is evidence of that. And so hopefully we can put things in place that will incentivize people to come back and do a lot of this manufacturing here in the United States and Pennsylvania again.
Of particular interest locally is Lock Haven University.
Sure.
The State System Board of Governors recently approved integration, and the impact on Lock Haven has been a reduction of programs and jobs. What are you guys talking about down there in terms of the Senate's support
Sure.
of the PASHE system and its 14 universities?
It's a difficult issue, and obviously a lot of this is being driven by student population. The amount of graduates west of Harrisburg and rural Pennsylvania from 30 or 40 years ago to the amount of high school graduates that we have today is far smaller. I think Penn State's decision back decades ago to offer 4-year degrees in their branch campuses also has a significant factor in this. And so there's a lot more competition out there, obviously, or choices for students. So that had to make an impact on the PASHE system as well. And now, you're going to have another population drop, because in 2008, when we went through the economic meltdown, people didn't have children at the level that they had before, and that hasn't returned. And so now there's this cliff, like I think 2025, 26 they're talking about. So it's even going to put more stress. We just don't have the graduates to support the system as we once did. Now the offset of that is these system schools are very important to these towns, whether it be Lock Haven, whether it be a Clarion, whether it be a Slippery Rock, an IUP, a Bloomsburg. All these, are Mansfield. They're all economic drivers of those communities. Obviously, if we didn't have Lock Haven University here, that's a lot of jobs, a lot of people, not just the job, but then people taking that money and spending it in the community, right? Buying cars or building homes or whatever it might be. So we have to do whatever we can to make sure that Lock Haven can thrive. Not being on the PASHE board, I don't have all the ins and outs, but my argument has been, as long as you treat all the schools fairly, which I don't think that they did. I think there's some schools that are in worse shape than Lock Haven that were not forced to integrate. And I don't know how you justify that to the people of Lock Haven, that we were forced to integrate and others who were in worse economic shape did not. But I'm willing to go ahead, if this helps save the system so that we keep a Lock Haven campus here. And the thing about the system is it's a system. So you have some bigger schools, you have some smaller schools, and maybe you have to combine some of the programming in certain places so you can afford to keep all these campuses open. I want to do everything we can to keep the campuses open because it keeps the jobs and keeps the communities thriving. And so that means coordinating some programs at one school and other programs at a different school, as long as you make sure that this school has enough programming and has enough specialty that kids are going to want to come here. Because if you say, well, we're going to integrate and we're going to merge and do all that, and then you just sort of don't give them anything, and then they die on the vine 5-10 years later, that's not a plan, or a plan I would support. And so they've assured us that they're not looking to shut down any campuses. They've assured us that they want to make sure every campus has attractive programming so that students want to come here, because that's the end of the day what drives the success of the school is the students want to come here. And that's why the NCAA decision is important as far as athletics. Is since if you're a branch campus or you're I don't know if branch is the correct word, but if you're combined with Bloomsburg, does Lock Haven still get to participate? Obviously, Lock Haven has a hugely successful wrestling program for the years, and obviously the football program and everything else brings students to the school. And so making sure that they can continue to compete is important. So that may not seem important, but it is, again, because it attracts students here. It attracts interest here. We have to make sure that all that continues. So as long as we are doing what we can to save dollars, but at the same time, make sure that the campuses can be viable, make sure that they are attractive for students, and I can support where they're heading. Again, I would have thought they should have treated all the schools the same, but short of that, hopefully we'll continue to monitor and continue to provide the oversight of the legislature or the board to make sure that happens.
Wonderful. So the last question would be, where are you going to direct your energies? What are your goals and priorities for the remainder of the year?
Survival. Look, I mean, again, trying to work with the governor to continue to bring normalcy to the Commonwealth, to the state, to the communities. Now that we're at the table, so to speak, with this Constitution Amendment, we have responsibility now. We can't sit back and complain. We have to be part of the solution. And so we want to do what we can to assist with the governor as those variants come through, and they're so concerned there, and that we don't infringe on people's freedoms, but at the same time we get education out there that people can make good decisions, and so we have to work with the governor to do that, and I think that's obviously a top priority for all of us. When we can't congregate, just as someone who represents Center County, when 100,000 people don't show up 7 Saturdays a year, that's a huge blow to our economy, as it is in every community that had Little League World Series again, right? Obviously, the Little League World Series is enormous for Lycoming County. It comes into Clinton County. The fact they're having a series this year, but they're still not having the people, and that's a blow to that community. So these are the things that we have to continue to work with to try to restore normalcy, so we can get back to a good economy, which then provides jobs, which provides income, which provides wealth to our communities. I think we have to, as we've went through this, continue to look at ways to empower parents on their education of their children. You should not be predetermined by your zip code or your economic status and where you have to go to school. Kids are like anything, are not one size fits all. My kids all go to public school. They do well in the public school. Happy in the public school. But as we've seen through this pandemic, some schools handled it fairly well, some did not. Some offered better alternatives to help educate, some did not. Why should a parent who may not have the ability to go out and pick a school, whether it be another public school, traditional or charter, or a private school that might be a better option for their kids to get educated, why shouldn't they have the same choice as everybody else has? Because they don't have the economics in their own family to make that happen. So I think we have a very good educational improvement tax credit program, which we were able to make historic increases in this year, and I think we need to continue to empower parents to make the best decision for their children so they can get the best education they possibly can. That's the key to a healthy society, is an educated society. And so we don't abandon the public schools by any stretch. We just set, again, record dollars to our public schools in the state budget. They got a lot of other money from the feds directly. So, we got to continue to make sure that there is a public system that is very good, that's an alternative for everyone. But, as we've seen this year, sometimes, and no fault of their own, public schools can't provide everything to everybody. And it shouldn't be just the wealthy who have options to go elsewhere. So I think anything we can do to empower parents, we should continue to do, and that'll probably be a big issue over the next year or so. And then again, just, and this goes back to the pandemic, but just whatever we can do for our economy. We're an energy-based economy in a lot of ways. I know that's a big battle out there, but energy is a huge job creator. It's something, again, we need as a society. I'm going to, sort of all the above type of individual, but we need to make smart decisions on our energy production. And I think the governor's going down the wrong path with this regional gas alliance. Why you'd want to get into an agreement with a bunch of states that don't produce energy on how energy is going to be taxed doesn't make sense to me. If you want to get into an alliance with West Virginia or Ohio, who have the same things at stake as we do, that makes some sense. Obviously we all want to reduce emissions the best we can. I think you're seeing the private sector really forcing this issue, forcing their companies to go carbon neutral and things like that. And that's great. That's what they should do. But for us to sort of get into an alliance, again, it goes back to me, the executive branch versus legislative branch. Every environmental alliance that we've been in, whether it be the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, whether it be the Chesapeake Bay, whether it be the Delaware River, all would pass by the legislature through a statute and then signed by the governor. The governor is trying to go outside the legislature to create this gas alliance with states like New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and northeastern states who don't produce much energy. So they don't have anything at stake, in trying to reduce their emissions. So we've reduced our emissions dramatically here in Pennsylvania, much because the natural gas industry has become such a big part of our energy production. Let's be smart about it. We still, it can be a great driver of our economy, but it's we all have something at stake in our environment too. It's usually most answers are in the middle somewhere, and if we can sort of put the extremists on each side out and get to the middle, I think we can still produce energy and produce jobs and take care of our environment.
Well, thanks, Senator Corman, for coming in and allowing us the opportunity to allow you to speak to your constituents who are our readers. Yeah. And we appreciate your presence here, and we'd like to invite you back.
Thank you. Anytime. Enjoy it.
Thanks.